Hello and welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to add the next 20 creature cards with mana values of 6 into our Momir Vig Cube. Oh, what's up, MTG BC? You are the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment of our ongoing Momir Vig Cube Series. If you are unfamiliar with this series or just need a refresher, you can look in the description below for the link to MTG Burgeoning's introduction to the Momir Vig Cube. And while you're down there searching in the description, you can also click the link to Cube Cobra, where you can view the entire contents of our cube as it stands right now. So for today, we've got 20 more creature cards with mana values of 6 going in, and we've got some doozies to talk about in this video. So let's get started right away with a mono blue Sphinx. It's Sphinx of Magosi. It's a 6/6 with flying for just 6 mana. If that were all, it would be a very nice creature to summon from the cube. But does it get better? We can pay 2 and a blue to draw a card, and then put a +1/+1 counter on Sphinx of Magosi. Of course, this is an ability we can only activate as long as we have that blue mana, so make sure you diversify your basic land library, MTG BC. Creature number 2 is a mono green edition. It is Spinebiter. We have a 3/4 beast with Infect, which means that this creature will deal damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters, and to players in the form of poison counters. So even though each player begins a game of Momir Vig with 24 life, if that player gets a 10th poison counter, they will lose. And we may have Spinebiter assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. So we could minimally put 3 poison counters onto an opponent. Now, we can't be guaranteed that the creatures that are blocking Spinebiter can't kill it, because it will still take combat damage. But that's for our battlefield state to determine, and to see exactly how our opponents are going to play against a creature that could be potentially game-winning, like Spinebiter. All right, creature number 3, we're going mono white and another flyer. It is Spirit of the Hearth. It's a 4/5 cat spirit, and yes, it does still fly, and we have hexproof. Now, that could be important for some of the creatures that we've already featured throughout this series, creatures with abilities that say target player must do something or something. If Spirit of the Hearth is on our side of the battlefield, our opponents will not be able to target us with those abilities. All right, creature 4, we're going mono red. We're just jumping all over the magic color pie. This is a 6/1 elemental called Spite Bellows. When it leaves the battlefield, it deals 6 damage to target creature. It does have an evoke cost, but in Momir Vig, that is completely meaningless. So for the purposes of this cube, this is a 6/1 elemental that deals 6 points of damage to target creature when it leaves the battlefield. In a lot of ways, we can 2-for-1 an opponent by sending this creature into combat, waiting for an opponent to block it, and with a weak toughness of 1, we know it's going to die, and with a power of 6, we should be able to take down one of our other opponent's creatures. We should be able to take down one of the creatures blocking it minimally, and then when it leaves the battlefield, we deal 6 points of damage to another creature. That's 2-for-1, and in Momir Vig, it could all come down to having more creatures on our side of the battlefield than any of our opponents. All right, 5-for-5 here. Next up is mono black, and it's another flyer. This is the Stalking Bloodsucker. It's a 4/4 vampire with the aforementioned evasion of flying. We can pay 1 and a black mana and discard a card from our hand to give Stalking Bloodsucker +2/+2 until end of turn. Again, this ability can only be activated if we have those swamps on your side of the battlefield. More important to think about, however, is how do we want to play the cards in our hand? If we choose to discard them to Stalking Bloodsucker's ability for the temporary power and toughness boost, well, that's one less card we have to discard in order to summon a creature from the Momir Vig Cube, and it's one less land that we can put into play to use as mana to summon those creatures. Stalking Bloodsucker is a very versatile blocking and attacking threat that could allow its controller to do some tough decision making, we'll put it that way. Alright, so we went mono blue, mono green, mono white, mono red, mono black. Of course, next up is colorless. And yes, it's another flyer. It's Steel Hellkite, which, let's face it, in this format, this could be one of the most powerful creatures in the entire cube. It's a 5/5 dragon with flying. For every 2 mana we pay, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Note that the mana is generic, so we don't necessarily have to tie it to any specific colors. More importantly, however, is the block of text under this dragon's generic mana fire-breathing ability. Pay X, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. This is an ability we can only activate once per turn. Every creature that's summoned from the Momir Vig Cube is a token copy of the creature. So the token copy has a mana value of 0. So if we connect with combat damage with Steel Hellkite, pay 0 into its X ability, we will wipe the entire opponent's board of all creatures. As I said, Steel Hellkite from the 6th spot could be one of the most powerful creatures in the entire cube. Alright, next up we're going to have a nice little run of mono-white creatures, beginning with Subjugator Angel. It's a 4/3 with flying that when it comes into play, we tap all creatures our opponents control. That could be very, very beneficial for us, and that could be absolutely devastating to the opponent that took their turn right before we did. If we're sitting down with 3 opponents, that opponent has their entire battlefield tapped down for 3 turns. Our turn, and then the 2 opponents between us and that last opponent. Subjugator Angel could be one of those cards that knocks out an opponent just by coming into play. Another angel, we have Sunblade Angel, a 3/3 with flying, first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. 4 keywords on a 3/3 with an investment of 6 mana? Yeah, that could work. It could work very, very well. The vigilance is nice because it allows the creature to be available for blocking. The lifelink is fantastic because, again, we're only beginning the game with 24 life. The evasion of flying is great, and so is the first strike. All right, next up we have another angel. This time it's Sunblast Angel. It's a 4/5 with flying that when it enters the battlefield, it destroys all tapped creatures. Hopefully for us, we decide to summon our creatures before combat, just in case the Sunblast Angel comes down and we accidentally have any tapped creatures. Well, the Sunblast Angel is going to destroy them in addition to any of our opponent's creatures that are also tapped. Alright, reaching the halfway mark of this video is another mono-white creature. This time, it is the Sun Titan. We have a 6/6 giant with vigilance that whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, we may return target permanent card with CMC 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. Of course, here in Momir Vig, the only cards that will be in our graveyard will be lands. So, this, for the purposes of eroticizing, that doesn't sound good, for changing the errata on Sun Titan, it should read, whenever Sun Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target land from your graveyard to the battlefield. Because again, remember, all creatures are token copies, and once they leave the battlefield, they cease to exist. Alright, kicking things off with creature number 11 as we do the second half of our CMC 6 creatures is our first multicolored edition, and it is Swathcutter Giant. Here we have a 5/5 giant soldier with vigilance, and then whenever this creature attacks, it deals 1 damage to each creature defending player controls. In a format like Momir Vig, where there are no instants or sorcery spells, there are no planeswalkers to cast, any kind of removal that can thin out the ranks of creatures on our opponent's side of the battlefield is very, very valuable. And here with Swathcutter Cutter Giant, we could take out a ton of creatures on one opponent's side as long as their toughness is 1. All right, next up, we're back to mono white and another flyer. This time we have Swooping Talon. Yes, Swooping Talon. We're going old school here, folks. Swooping Talon. It's a 2/6 with flying, and we can pay 1 generic mana to have Swooping Talon lose flying until end of turn. Why would we ever want to have a creature lose flying? Well, that's probably because of its second ability, which is Provoke. For anyone who is unfamiliar or can't remember what Provoke does, whenever a creature with Provoke attacks, we may have target creature defending player controls untap and block it if able. Now, if our creature has flying and there's some pesky nuisance utility creature on one of our opponent's sides of the battlefield, and we really want to get rid of that creature, we can pay 1 to have the flying removed from Swooping Talon, and then through its Provoke mechanic, we can force that creature to block it, and hopefully we can kill it. Creature removal, very, very important in Momir Vig. All right, mono black, another flyer. It is Thief of Blood. Man, you gotta love a card that says, you gotta love a card that's called Thief of Blood. It's a 1/1 vampire, again, with the flying, and when it ETBs, we remove all counters from all permanents, and then Thief of Blood enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each counter removed this way. There could be a number of counters floating around the battlefield during a game of Momir Vig, and if Thief of Blood ETBs, oh, it's going to be a massive threat. It's only a 1/1 to start with the investment of 6 mana, and the randomness of summoning the creatures from the cube is going to determine whether or not that's going to be a massive flying, potentially game-winning threat, or if it's just a 1/1 chump blocker. All right, we're back to... we are back to a colorless edition, and it's another flyer. This time we have Thopter Assembly. It's a 5/5 Thopter with the aforementioned flying, and at the beginning of our upkeep, if we control no Thopters other than Thopter Assembly, we return this card to our hand and create 5 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. So a couple of things about this card. If we control no other Thopters and Thopter Assembly is returned to our hand, it then ceases to exist, because when a token leaves the battlefield, it no longer exists. It's most likely that that's going to be the case because there are very few Thopters flying around the Momir Vig Cube. Leaving on our side of the battlefield, however, will be 5 1/1 colorless flying Thopter artifact creature tokens. So we're swapping out 1 5/5 flyer for 5 1/1 flyers. And let's be honest, in a format like Momir Vig, where everything is governed around combat, having the 5 1/1s may be more, may be a better play for us than having the 1 5/5 flyer. All right, reaching the 3/4 mark of this video, we're going back-to-back colorless creatures. This time it's Thornwatch Scarecrow. It's a 4/4 that has Wither if we control a green creature, and has Vigilance if we control a white creature. Again, although all creatures from the cube are summoned randomly, hopefully we can have a red and or green creature if we are fortunate or unfortunate enough to summon a copy of Thornwatch Scarecrow to our side of the battlefield. All right, next up we have Thunder Brute. We have a mono red Cyclops that's a 5/5 with trample. Come on, camera, get in the game here. All right, 5/5 trample, and it has the Tribute 3 mechanic. So we're going all the way back to original Theros block for the Tribute mechanic, and this means that when Thunder Brute comes into play, we choose an opponent, and if that opponent allows us to put 3 +1/+1 counters on it, it becomes an 8/8 trampler. If the opponent does not pay tribute, then it becomes a 5/5 with haste until end of turn. So we're either getting a 5/5 with haste and trample that can attack the same turn, of course, or we're getting an 8/8 with trample. Either way, it's probably going to be dependent on board state, and most likely we're going to choose the one opponent that we think is going to make sure that we can get the biggest creature as possible. All right, back-to-back mono-red creatures. Next up, we're going back to the time of Weatherlight. It's Thundermare, a 5/5 with haste, and when it enters the battlefield, tap all other creatures. This could go a lot of different ways. If we are playing the defensive and then all of our creatures become tapped when Thundermare enters the battlefield, leaving ourselves susceptible to combat with just having a 5/5 on our side, well, most likely we're probably going to lose the game. If we are playing the offensive and our opponents are trying to play catch-up, well, then each opponent after us has the ability to attack the other opponents and try to, get their life totals lower and lower and lower because their entire boards are tapped. So Thundermare's presence could go a lot of different ways, and it just highlights the point of the cube that not every single creature is going to be uber helpful or uber powerful. Next up, we're going back to another mono blue creature. This time it is Tolarian Kraken, a 4/6. Then whenever we draw a card, we may pay 1 generic mana. If we do, we may tap or untap target creature. More often than not, we're probably going to tap down a blocking threat just so that we can send our creatures in for some combat damage, hopefully knocking an opponent closer and closer to leaving the game. All right, our second last creature, the first of back-to-back colorless creatures to close out the video, we have Tribal Golem. It's a 4/4 golem, that's its base, but it gets a little bit better if the stars are aligned and they favor the creatures that it's looking to on its text here on the card. All right, so this 4/4 golem will have trample if we control a beast. It'll have haste if we control a goblin. It'll have first strike if we control a soldier. It'll have flying if we control a wizard, and it will have a regenerate ability for a black mana if we control a zombie. Now, those 4 tribes are highly represented in this cube, so it's very, very likely that Tribal Golem could be more than just the 4/4 as it enters the battlefield. All right, creature number 20 to close out this video, we have Triskelion, a 1/1 that ETBs with 3 +1/+1 counters, and we can remove a +1/+1 counter from Triskelion, and it deals 1 damage to any target. If there is any way through any of our creatures that we can get an activated ability that can put +1/+1 counters onto Triskelion, then we have a cycle that we should be able to end up winning the game just by being able to control the battlefield and then slowly whittling our opponent's life totals southward. All right, there you have it, MTG BC. 20 more creature cards heading into the Momir Vig Cube, all of which have mana values of 6. Let me know in the comments section below, which are your favorites. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.